Hello and welcome to another edition of the Blame Phil McKenzie Hour, where we, all of us, gather together and point our fingers at Phil McKenzie for persuading us out of making very well-reasoned picks. Say it with me, everybody. Boo!
I can do nothing but accept everyone's censure.
That's right. He's feeling it, folks. He's feeling your derision.
I deserve it. Why was I trying to use logic to figure out how the fights of maybe the greatest fighting mind of his generation, if not of all time, was going to go?
Well, it's heavy hands. I'm Connor. That person you just yelled at through your phone or laptop was Phil McKenzie. And we are, of course, talking about UFC 305. The main event, just one of the fights that Phil convinced me against my will. Really twisted my arm. I had no choice in the matter. One of the fights that he persuaded me to pick incorrectly. It was, of course, Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. We also had on this card Kai Kara-France versus Steve Erceg. That one I was very excited to get wrong because Kai Kara-France is cool, and it was cool to see him get a big win. Sucks for Steve Erceg, but he'll be back. And and then we had Dan Hooker, Mateusz Gamrot. Another one, which Phil somehow persuaded me was just unwinnable for old Dan Hooker. In fact, this was a tremendous night for every single member of the City kickboxing team, except Israel Adesanya, which, at the very least, I have an out, Phil, right? Because I did sort of explicitly say, although this didn't stop some people on Twitter from misinterpreting it. They're like, I gotta call you out for getting this one wrong. It's like, I think I made it pretty clear that I was sort of picking against my actual instinct. I think I said, I'm picking Israel Adesanya because I'm trying to will the universe to restore order.
Yep.
Didn't work. The universe is a dark and insensible place. And Dricus du Plessis is the god of that universe. He is a god. And we are mere mortals next to him. Because yes, he not only beat Israel Adesanya, he beat a relatively good-looking Israel Adesanya by finish. Which now means he has finished the two best middleweights of, this may be the tail end of their generation, but really like the two of the best middleweights of I suppose, the modern era. Have now fallen to Dricus.
Yep, I guess he's the best now.
He's the best.
There were a number of people that were making strongly making the case that Israel had surpassed Anderson Silva. So, I mean...
Yeah.
We just say it now. Maybe he's just the best middleweight of all time.
Yeah. Let me say this right now. Can we please put an end? I know this won't happen, but let's stop declaring any champion who manages one or two successful defenses the greatest in their division's history. Because Israel Adesanya is not greater than Anderson Silva. You know, he even if you argue that some of his wins are against better opponents, they are much less convincing wins, many of them. Like, I don't count that Yoel Romero win the same way I would if, he had actually beaten him. Anderson Silva is still the greatest middleweight of all time. I don't think that's really in question. And, Dricus is now in the conversation, officially. That's one win, one defense. Already they're going to start talking about how he's already Dominic Cruz, hilariously, Did you hear on the broadcast?
Oh, yes.
He was saying people are going to start fighting
everyone's
like...
going to be fighting like this.
Dude, you can't fight like Dricus. What are you talking about? It is a nonsensical style. Anybody who is not Dricus who tried to fight like this would lose. That's why we've had such a miserable time picking his fights correctly. Because it doesn't make sense. It's nonsense what he does in there. But it's
yeah, I mean, he's genuinely the best bad fighter of
ever
all time in the UFC. I mean, but this is the thing, this just underplays like Dricus, because he was already that like 3 fights ago.
Yeah.
And he's only won against better and better competition since then.
Yeah. And he keeps finishing them. I mean, like, he couldn't finish Sean Strickland, which is hilarious. But he's crushing great fighters. Yeah, no, unquestionably. I mean, I don't even think it's not even specific to the division. It's perhaps not even specific to the sport. He might be the best one of the best bad fighters ever.
Yeah.
I
genuinely can't think of anyone in even combat sports.
Right.
Even outside of combat sports, anyone who just you could look at and just be like, man, this guy is uncoordinated.
Right.
And looks terrible all the time and simply has this level of success.
Someone who just defies everything you thought you knew about what good fighting looked like and how it was supposed to work.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of like boxers that are like sluggers, but like Rocky Marciano was a better technician than Dricus du Plessis by far. He was coordinated. He had some defense. Like, he could counterpunch. Like, not that Dricus can't do these things, but Rocky could do these things in a way that looked like an athlete doing them. It is insane that Dricus du Plessis, who is clearly an elite athlete, I mean, he is very powerful. He's very strong. He's very durable. And he has incredible conditioning. More than that, even incredible willpower to simply overcome his conditioning failing him, which is often the case, as I believe it definitely was in this fight. Nothing he does makes sense. And he has now beaten the last 2 like real middleweight champions who actually like reigned and defended. I first of all, I love it. I mean, it's a beautiful time that we're in. I feel that the middleweight division should be embarrassed that they were incapable of figuring out a way to even have a good showing against the Israel Adesanya that we have been seeing for the last several years. That it took Sean Strickland to expose just how allergic he is to actual concerted pressure. They should be embarrassed. And for that reason, I feel about Dricus that he is a sort of cleansing flame, which has come to purify the middleweight division and punish them for their sins. This is how you do it, he says. I'm not even good, and look, I'm going to go out there and crush Israel Adesanya.
Yeah, because it's the cleansing flame of perception. Like, this is the complete opposite of people, of the mental block of people being frozen at range because they're convinced that whatever they will do, they will get obliterated by this surgical technical striker that's going to wipe them out. This is the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
This is a flailing, shaved gorilla of a man who is constantly exhausted, who looks like each limb is only is run by its own autonomous AI that's only loosely connected to the center.
It's like AIs which are exactly as smart as all the AIs currently out there. It's hallucinating AI.
Whatever perception people have of Dricus, it is 100% not. This guy is an insurmountable technical wall that I cannot possibly attack.
Yeah.
We have, it's the cleansing flame. It's how much have people been forced to reckon with the idea that, maybe no one is that good.
Yeah.
Maybe no one's that good if you just go for it hard enough and you just think carefully about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, you can beat anyone.
Yeah. You have to believe. Chris Weidman was right. His body just fell apart, you know? Because this is the thing. I have to continue to emphasize this. Dricus du Plessis, again, clearly a great athlete. You wouldn't know it from how unbelievably uncoordinated he is. It's like, I believe I said on Twitter that he's like, imagine Yoel Romero with 2 left feet and a hip that could tell when rain was coming. He's like, he's got that level of physical potency, but none of the grace that you associate with that level of athlete. But more than that, Dricus genuinely does have a very special, I don't mean this to sound backhanded, but it's about to, mind for fighting.
Oh, yeah.
He really does. I pointed it out when it first happened. It was after the Brad Tavares fight, which is perhaps the craziest fight, except maybe for the Derek Brunson bout. Both insanely stupid fights where he's just getting hit and he looks exhausted and he's getting hurt. He's like going for takedowns and falling flat on his ass, like horrible, messy fights. And after that bout with Brad Tavares, he went all 3 rounds. He's barely getting his breath in the post-fight interview, and he is recalling in detail every moment of an exchange in the first round in which he got hurt. That is not normal. It really isn't. How many established champions have you heard ask their corners, what round am I in? Because the adrenaline is coursing and they're in that sort of trance-like state that you go into. Maybe this is why Dricus looks so awkward. He never gets into the trance-like state, the flow state. He has no flow.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe every part of Dricus's body has to be controlled consciously. Like, he's literally got no subconscious mind. So that he's having to coordinate everything using the power of his, using the power of his conscious brain.
Yeah.
And, it just can't keep up. But the advantage is that he's, like, constantly aware of all things because he just doesn't have a subconscious.
I remember in the first round, I was keeping my heart beating.
Exactly.
And then he threw a jab.
Like, you've seen this man struggle with breathing. That's why. It's because he's constantly having to go, like... And he can
breathe.
Like, make these adaptations because he's constantly having to like run 10 million calculations in his head about how much he should be breathing in and out and how to keep blood pumping around his body.
But he's like a fucking mentat. Like he's able to do it. He's running these calculations. He's insanely present in a way that most elite athletes are not, and aware and calculating what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, he was like this after this fight as well, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, he did the same thing after this. He was like recalling in detail, moments from the finishing sequence, I think, and comparing it to his success. He was like, oh, it was just like what happened in, round 2 when I hit that takedown, but I knew it was going to be more effective when he got tired. I'm like, how did he remember when, I know that might sound crazy if you don't think of it in these terms, but really good fighters do not remember like when things happened in the fight to that level of detail. That's unusual. He's mentally sharp in a way that most fighters aren't.
Yeah, and like, just keeping track of both individual exchanges and the fight as a whole is that, he was saying afterwards as well, I think, he was talking about how much more assertive Israel was in this fight. And he was saying, but I know he can't keep that up because he hasn't been doing, he hasn't been fighting that way for a long time. And I knew that once he was, he would have 1 or 2 minutes of it and then it would be my turn to go. Exactly right, Dricus. Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this guy genuinely has an amazing mind for fighting.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. Like, again, it's like, as you said, it's like Volkanovski's mind combined with the like athleticism of Yoel Romero and the coordination of Trevor Peake.
Yes. Yeah, it's such a bizarre combination. It really is. And let's not forget, while we're praising Dricus, and I'll continue to praise, for example, his mental toughness, which he really, really needed in this fight, because I don't care what Dricus says, his nose is fixed now. That man was gassed. Mm-hmm. You know? And I think he was consciously choosing to rest up, which he also did when he fought Darren Till. If you remember that fight, he wrestled insanely hard and he threw 9,000 punches, all arm punches, in the first minute of the first round when he had Darren Till pinned in like a half back mount against the fence. And in round 2, Darren Till was coming on and landed a ton of shots and had a lot of success. But Dricus just let it happen because he knew he needed to recover. And I think he did the exact same thing in this fight. But the fact that he could weather the pressure and the onslaught, an intelligent onslaught too from Adesanya, the first guy I've seen who really, really understood how wide open Dricus is to body punches. We specifically pointed out that Izzy is not much of a body puncher.
Yeah.
More of a body kicker. He really went to town with body punches in this fight, and it was a great idea. But Dricus just weathered it, thinking he's going to tire out, and I'm going to come back, which was true and accurate and a very correct thing to be thinking in this unbelievable state of poise that he alone has access to in crazy fights like this. But while we're praising Dricus and all of his unusually great qualities, let us not forget he is also bad at fighting. He is very clearly bad at fighting. His technique is so horrible. And technique isn't everything, but in a similar way to Israel Adesanya casting a spell over the division, convincing them that he couldn't be touched when in fact, for a lot of that time, he really could. Dricus is going to run into an opponent who simply tears him to pieces, who punches with him and obliterates him when he's doing this shit like completely falling off of his feet, looking down at the floor, like just trusting that he can overthrow everything because he's going to bash head first into the guy's torso and hit what looks like an accidental takedown almost every time. This style is not sustainable, but it will be sustained until the terrible, terrible middleweight division, the middleweight division that allowed itself to be ruled by a flaccid Israel Adesanya, produces a fighter who actually realizes how massive all these openings really are. So that's it. We're back where we started. We have another incredibly exposable middleweight champ. And the question is anybody going to figure out, is anybody going to figure out how to hit the guy who doesn't know how to throw a punch?
I mean, this is the bizarre thing because, I mean, again, like, this is definitely the greatest technical performance of Dricus du Plessis' career, right? In terms of, consistency and approach and all that other kind of stuff. And I don't know that he was winning it.
No. It was
even more so in like retrospect, because I'm watching it live. I was like, oh yeah, this is pretty close. Watching it back, it's just like, I don't know how many rounds I could give you.
Yeah.
I don't think it's very many. And that he found the takedown and the submission, but it was also like, because at the time I was like, oh yeah, finally Dricus has a definite, a real standout performance. You can say, here's a championship, here is a championship fighter. But even this one, I was like, man, this was iffy. You needed like one major moment to turn this around.
Yeah. By the way,
Yeah,
just because you mentioned that really quick, I want to say a couple of people I think misinterpreted our statement that I agreed with you last week that it doesn't feel like Dricus had a breakout performance. And people were saying it's incredible cope not to acknowledge that the Robert Whittaker win is a huge statement. It is a statement win. Our point was that it does not feel like a good performance. It's in the same way we were saying about Gamrot, a great win that nonetheless feels very chancy and uncertain right up until the finish happens. Mm-hmm. That was the point.
Yeah.
This was overall, I think,
like Izzy has a win over Yoel Romero.
Exactly. But that's not a standout performance.
No.
Dricus is better than that. At least he got the finish. He went for it.
Yeah,
he always goes for it.
No doubt. Yeah, absolutely no doubt. This is much better than stuff like that. This is, as I said, it's the most impressive Dricus performance I think I've ever seen.
Yeah.
In terms of consistency and in terms of like forcing a game plan through.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, going back to what you said, I think about like punching with Dricus, that's the really interesting thing about this, right? Is that so much of Adesanya's career has been as the middleweight champion has been him being sort of nominally a counterpuncher, or at least, fighting from range and waiting for the other person to throw and not initiating all that much and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And like in this fight, he did what you would want him to, which I think, and what we said that he should be doing, which is to, go forward and pressure Dricus and work into the body and so on. And
yeah, at least in spots. He did it as well as he did it in the Pineda rematch.
Yeah,
not as consistently.
I think he's just getting older, and it's very, very hard to be aggressive when you're older.
I think I personally have strongly underrated the extent to which Izzy's decline is just a product of his age, because many people have pointed out that he has been getting hurt in basically every one of his last like 3 or 4 fights, and also that I think you can point to the fact that he literally gassed himself out by hitting Dricus in the body too many times. Like, that is a youth thing where Dricus could just come back from that kind of punishment in a way that a good athlete who is in excellent shape like Izzy couldn't. And I think that's probably a product of age. He was able to go 5 crazy rounds with Gastelum and 5 crazy rounds with Brad Tavares, throwing a shitload of volume, and held it together. So yeah, please continue. I just wanted to say, Izzy is old, and I sort of had to reckon with that watching this for the first time. Yeah,
it's very, very hard to be aggressive when you're getting old. I mean, and he's just old in fight terms. I mean, he's had like over 100 combat sports bouts at this point.
Yeah.
As a professional.
I think he had like 80 bouts as a kickboxer or something, yeah.
Yeah. That is an insane amount.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, it was partially that he was aggressive, but he couldn't stay aggressive. And partially it was like, again, watching this, you were like, where is his counterpunching game?
Yeah. It's not there.
Like, and so much of it was like the stuff that did work on Whittaker and so on, but it's kind of shallow, is that he's just like leaning backwards.
Yep.
And then like throwing the counter across the plane of his feet. And as both sort of Whittaker and Dricus keyed into, you could just chase him down when he's doing that. You just keep moving forward. You don't stop in place. And so, yeah, we had these kind of situations where Dricus was just running and flailing, and Adesanya was just backing up in a straight line.
Yep.
Did you see MVP watching this?
No. What did MVP have to say?
He's just getting increasingly distressed with Adesanya backing up in straight line. Basically, and
he was
turning off the fence and not.
He was immediately keying into how bad the footwork was.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, that's why MVP's still good. Not that he's a perfect technician either, but he at least knows it's an error when he backs up in a straight line. Izzy has been fighting for ages doing this, and simply was able to convince himself that it was functional because, again, nobody tested it. This is just a division of profoundly unprincipled fighters. Like, how are you letting people get away with this shit? How are you letting Dricus get away with it? How were you letting Israel Adesanya get away with it? Robert Whittaker's not blameless in this. He had 2 chances against Israel Adesanya, and he couldn't expose it either. He should be a good enough boxer to do that, but he couldn't.
I mean, the ways that he exposed it was that he turned the fight into being
terrible,
into being like short bursts of incredibly ugly blitzes, much like the Dricus ones. Let's not give too much credit to Robert Whittaker, who can look super ugly on the front foot as well.
Yes, he can.
But he, that was pretty much it, is that he would just like throw one of those and then maybe he would land and maybe he wouldn't. And then he would go back to like fencing for a while, but he was very, very conservative with it, whereas Dricus was just, going ham. And one of the other advantages of Dricus, with that, whatever it is, that processing power, is that Dricus just doesn't do the same thing in a row very much.
He doesn't, yeah. I mean, sometimes it seems by accident, because it honestly looks at multiple points in this fight and many others that he doesn't even know what stance he's in.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you, I have not seen this. He does what, you ready for a reference that's even nerdier than chess, Phil?
Whoa.
Dricus does what is called in historical fencing a passing step. A passing step is when you start with, say, your right foot back, and you've got your sword like on your right shoulder, and you step forward with your right foot while swinging the sword from the right side. You cover a lot of distance that way, and you can generate a lot of, not weight transfer force, but rotational force by stepping through with the strike. This sort of footwork fell out of favor in fencing around the time of the rapier becoming in vogue, because this is a long, straight, quick weapon that thrusts, basically a jab, and it turns out if you do a massive committal step, you are going to run yourself through.
Yeah.
And Dricus does this with punches. I can't explain how comical it is to see this parallel, that he starts in orthodox and steps forward with his right. This is not how a shift usually works. Usually when you shift, you're throwing from like your left hook while you're stepping forward onto your right foot to transfer the weight onto your right foot. You don't bring your whole body stiffly together like a bear walking, like bear walking with your punches. It's so strange. Yeah. But it also adds to his awkwardness and unpredictability. A lot of these people have had just a devilishly hard time interpreting Dricus's combinations. And it's because a lot of them are combinations that don't even seem to make a great deal of sense to Dricus himself. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure he knows what he's doing. He's just like, throw left, right. And wherever your feet end up, like the other guy doesn't know what's happening either. And he trusts in that. He just goes. And the power of belief really is unparalleled.
Yeah. I think it's just a shame that, like, I don't know who we have to fight Dricus now.
Yeah, I guess they're going to do a Strickland rematch, which sounds horrible.
Does sound horrible. It was a horrible fight.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, yeah, it wasn't the worst fight I've ever seen, but it wasn't very good. It was very mediocre.
Yeah. To be fair, Izzy has had at least 3 or 4
much worse fights. Yes,
much worse fights. Yeah.
Izzy Strickland was worse, except for the fact that it was a huge upset and it had one big knockdown. But in the balance, most of that fight was a lot more tedious to watch than Duplessis Strickland, for sure. Other than that, I suppose there's a Whittaker rematch in the cards. And we've currently got Nasruddin Imavov. I believe he is booked. if he can get a win. I don't have a great deal of faith in his ability to stop Dricus's pressure and wrestling combined. But he's another contender on the horizon. There's not a lot of promising challengers at the gate, though. It has to be said.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? Another thing about Dricus that stood out to me. This is somehow makes everything else even stranger. He has an incredibly dexterous left leg.
Yeah, I saw Jack Slack said this as well. It's like, of all the AIs that control his limbs, that's advanced. By far the smartest.
Yeah, it's really strange. He was really, really making Izzy uncomfortable with some quick and like agile left high kicks. And also
his ability to counter low kicks with low kicks.
Yeah. It's the only strike of his where it looks like the chamber is like a deliberate attempt to confuse the opponent. Mm-hmm. He really gets the knee up and like torques the hip over, and so it kind of has like a question mark kick quality every time he throws it. Mm-hmm. It's really difficult to read. It's really quick. He stays on balance when he throws it. It's the only limb in his arsenal that you can say that about. It's really bizarre. It
greatly contributes to all the confusion.
Yeah, because it's by the way,
all four limbs which are currently constantly flying, like one of them is actually like doing a really good job.
And it's the one that I would say most fighters struggle with the most. Like having a good no switch lead leg kicking game.
Yeah.
That's not a typical skill. It takes a really high level of skill and dexterity to do that. But it's the only part of his game that feels like that. It's so insane. It's bizarre. I also want to point out one of the occasions when Izzy did try to counter in the pocket. I initially thought it was a knockdown. He went for like a lean back uppercut like he hit Whitaker with. It did not land because he could not track just how insanely Dricus would be looking at the floor while trying to swing his way off the fence. And Dricus straight up falls on his face and secures a low single as a result of that. It is the funniest takedown I have ever seen. He falls over. He doesn't change levels. He just pancakes himself and manages to take Izzy down. Izzy's just profound confusion in the pocket. It's like, what the fuck is happening? I love him. I mean,
he was Laugh Out Loud Pure Entertainment Fighter of the Year for a reason.
He's going to be the first and perhaps only ever Laugh Out Loud entertainment fighter who is a champion.
Yeah.
Seriously. There's no other champion who's ever been this funny to watch. This fight was very funny. I mean, Dricus brings the laughs.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that, Pereira said that he was thinking about coming back down to 185, and then my two reactions were like, come on, man, no, you're not.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Very difficult to see that weight cut happening again.
Surely he would explode. I still have no idea how he did it in the first place.
Yeah.
And secondly, like, I had some friends who are like, finally there'll be some, resolution and, the world will be understandable again once Pereira knocks this guy out. I was like, are you sure he would knock him out, though? Are you sure he would not almost knock him out?
Yeah.
But then,
get
Dricus would
out
bounce off the cage into an Imanari roll and somehow just end up instantly submitting him.
Yeah. Dricus can't do an Imanari.
And then just get up and just be like, oh yeah, this is the cage as I moved into it, I wanted to use the momentum, and
calculated
into this Baroque takedown.
I calculated the tensile strength of the chain link and determined it would be enough to somersault my way into a takedown. Yeah, my I have to work on my South African accent. It's just my Australian accent, but deaf at the moment.
Yep. Hey, man. But yeah, I mean, because people I'm sure Pereira would beat him. There have been so many people at this point who I've been sure would beat him.
Right?
So many people.
Yeah, it's a long list. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting fight if it does happen, or if it happens at 205. I mean, since we have a dearth of interesting contenders here, and kind of at light heavyweight too, although they have hilariously chosen not to go with Magomed Ankalaev, the most cursed man on the planet. He has now been stepped over in favor of Khalil Roundtree. Did you see that?
Yes, I did. Ramzan Gamrot is going to be so mad.
It really is wrong. Like, it's not a sporting decision, but
it is. It is, but also everyone finds it very funny.
Yeah, it's hard not to. Yeah, so maybe he'll go up to 205 and fight Pineda there, and he'll be supercharged Dricus. No weight cut required. He won't even actually get tired and have to take time off to recover. But on the one hand, Pineda is a massive puncher who will punch in the pocket with Dricus. On the other hand, he is a much worse wrestler than Israel Adesanya, who just got submitted by Dricus.
Yep.
So, I'd love to see it.
And one thing you can say about Dricus, he's not going to, is that, like Bilal, remember the name Muhammad? You cannot rely on this man to not make adjustments.
Yeah.
If you're just like, he's going to come in there and swing at me, like, you're just going to lose.
Yep.
Hey, he double jabbed, just like I said he should. And true, just like I said it would be. It looked hilarious.
He threw some of his funniest punches ever in this fight. I mean, there were moments he was...
Yeah. So much of it. The grappling was funny.
Yeah.
Like, the small punches were funny. The big punches were funny as fuck.
He's awesome. There is nobody remotely like Dricus du Plessis. He's incredible.
No. Yeah. An absolute MMA unicorn.
Yeah. Truly. All right. Well, I think I could go on talking about this. I could talk a lot more shit about Izzy, to be honest, but that's nearly 40 minutes of discussion, and we do have other interesting fights to get to. So let's call it there and take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the co-main event, flyweights. Kai Kara France and Steve Erceg threw down. It didn't last long. After that, Dan Hooker over Mateusz Gamrot, and I suppose we could also talk about the rest of the main card if we have time and energy for it. Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Tuivasa. I at least have some things to say about that, continuing my theme of why don't MMA fighters learn from last week. And Carlos, is it Prates or Praches? Praches. That's often how the T is pronounced.
Prates, right?
Yeah, but isn't the T is often makes a ch sound in Brazilian Portuguese, doesn't it?
I'm going to trust them. I know I shouldn't.
You know how, like, Lyoto Machida said, like, Chicho?
Yeah.
I'm going to fight Chicho Ortiz.
Mm-hmm.
Black Belch. We all know that sound.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Anyway, Carlos Prates fought Li Jingliang and had a very impressive showing in the main card opener. We might talk about all of that. We might talk about some of it. We will talk about some of it after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We're talking about the co-main event of UFC 305 now. Kai Kara France, Steve Erceg. I believe we both picked Steve Erceg. In fact, I think we quite erroneously said, well, maybe not, that this was one of the better matchups in the division for him. At least it was one where he was going to get to just focus pretty solely on the striking. And you know what? I don't think Steve Erceg was doing badly in this fight. In fact, I think he was just at the beginning phases of starting to figure Kai Kara-France out. But he forgot that Kai Kara-France was also figuring him out. And in sort of thematic cohesion with the main event, we actually saw an MMA fighter just very effectively punishing lazy footwork. That's what ended this fight. Kai Kara-France noticed it. He picked up on it. He even talked about it in the post-fight interview. He talked about how, at least in very simple terms, that he knew he was going to have to put layers to get a shot home on Steve Erceg. So he was looking for an opportunity to get him moving and then follow up with a second shot. And that second shot happened to be one of his best, the left hook. So yeah, what did you think?
I mean, I think one of the things I just haven't really internalized until now is Kai Kara-France as like a puncher. I don't really think of him as a puncher, which is
really?
Retrospectively pretty stupid.
Probably on par, I would say, with Pantoja as flyweight punchers, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely been someone like he's been a bit of a what's his face, giant chin man at lightweight.
Giant chin man at lightweight.
Drew Dober. He's been a bit of a Drew Dober in that he's moved from like being a more volume-based mobile guy to being just like someone who can actually genuinely crack.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess I haven't really internalized it from him until now when they were talking about his stats of how many people he's knocked down.
Yep.
And yeah, how many fights he's had that have ended by early KOs.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, he had like a fairly tepid decision win over Amir Alpazi. He obviously couldn't knock out Brandon Moreno.
Decision loss. I can understand why you made that mistake, but yeah.
Yeah. Cody, I mean, he knocked out Cody Garbrandt, who never should have been at that weight class, and Rogerio Pontarin, and so on and so forth. Like, yeah, I don't really think of him as being like a big puncher. Yeah, I mean, but with that in mind, I guess this makes more sense because I was mostly thinking like the issue is that he will land some blitzes, but that Erceg is just going to figure him out over time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really take account of the fact that, like, what if he lands a blitz and he just knocks him out instantly?
Nope.
Admittedly, I probably still wouldn't have picked it. I think this is one of those ones where the only way that I could make myself pick this, that I could pick this one is if I knew what the result was in retrospect.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Because, Erceg had just gone 5 rounds with Pantoja, and I would be like, oh, are you picking him to get KO'd in round 1 by Kai Kara-France? I just can't make myself do that.
Yep.
Yeah, this was good stuff from Kara-France, who, as you said, like, he just noticed that, said this before about Erceg, of all the many, many things Steve Erceg is good at, like defensive footwork and defense in general, really, that isn't just like, isn't drawing things out of his opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of Max Holloway-esque.
Yes.
In that way. Max Holloway can be very good defensively as long as he knows that what you are doing is in reaction to what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just coming straight after Max Holloway. He is mostly just backing straight up.
Yeah, and gets hit a lot.
Yeah.
And we did point out Steve Erceg has eaten like at least 2 or 3 terrifically clean shots in basically every fight we've seen from him.
Mm-hmm.
It does happen. I mean, not that that's anything unusual. He's out there fighting, good fighters, even like fighters like Matt Schnell maybe aren't great in terms of resume, but is certainly a fast fighter who, like, you're going to get hit by him. But he has been hit super clean by a shot he did not appear to see coming multiple times. And I would say that this one felt the most deliberate from the opponent of all of those, because Kai Kara-France threw that right into left shift combination 4 or 5 times in this fight. And I suppose you could knock him for being predictable. I think Kai Kara-France, the reason he has so many knockdowns but not more knockouts is perhaps because he can be quite predictable, especially if the opponent isn't walking into his shots for him. But on the other hand, Steve Erceg's defense was predictable. He backed up in a straight line every single time Kai Kara-France surged after him, and he was getting away with it. He basically had a Band-Aid because he knew the left hook was coming, even one that knocked him out. And he had stopped a previous one just by backpedaling, but keeping his right hand glued to his cheek. His guard is there. But in this case, it was a little too wide, and the shot just slipped past it. You don't want to have everything depending on your hand being perfectly placed, in small MMA gloves, no less, to stop a power punch. And everything was depending on that because his feet were not in position. He was basically midair, galloping backwards. His feet were together. He was super tall. If you're planted and stable, you've got your shocks in place, you're in good position, your legs are ready to absorb that impact, then you can afford to have a shot, even a very hard one, slip past your guard. But if you are as out of position as Erceg was when that knockout sequence started, then relying totally on your guard stopping the punch is not going to work forever. And it didn't. Kai Kara-France found the timing, found a way to just sneak the shot past that right hand, and Erceg had, even Erceg, I'm still sure has a great chin, but how was he supposed to take that shot? It was a massive, full-bodied power shot, and he didn't have any ability to absorb the impact.
Yep. He was, inches away from kind of falling over as it was. Yeah.
Yeah, he barely got away from the right hand that
lazy hand position, I think, in general, which was what Kara-France was seeing as he was pushing him back, is that, if you're going to use the hands to block things, at least it needs to be, take some lessons from the fighting mind of Dricus du Plessis. At least have your guard be, tight.
Hey.
Yeah, every time he was kind of just flailing his arms out in the air.
Yeah, he had a tidy right block to the hook, I think, in the one that immediately preceded that, the knockdown combination. But, yeah, like I said, that's just a very thin layer of protection if none of the other elements of your position are there to stop the punch from hurting you if it does get through. So, aside from that recurrent mistake, one which many, many MMA fighters get away with all the time, which isn't to say it's not one he shouldn't fix. I'd like to think Steve Erceg will. I hope we'll see more pivoting as a retreat from Steve Erceg going forward. But aside from that, I didn't think Erceg was doing badly. He was clearly processing everything that Kara-France was showing him. He was picking up on the patterns, just starting to ramp up the pressure and find the timing on his counters, which is what we expected him to do, to be a sort of aggressive counterpuncher here, use his jab to draw Kara-France out and then nail him. But Kara-France was paying attention.
Yep. Yeah, it's just like a great performance from him. And yeah, as you said, it was actually pretty good to see, because Kara-France has been unheralded and has never really won that step up moment. It was nice to see him get that in a big crowd.
Yeah. I mean, he came close against Amir Al-Bazzi. That could have been a breakout, a win for him. Not that it would have been an overall fantastic performance, but it was still one where he pretty heavily outstruck Al-Bazzi.
Yeah. I'm still not sure he lost that fight. But, yeah,
me neither.
That's what it is.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say, just a minor grievance, that Kai does that, he does like there's a term for it. It's like pukele or something. I'm not going to embarrass myself by saying that's right. But like part of like the haka, with the tongue out and like the hand over the head, the intimidating, Maori posture. And I was actually kind of shocked the unanimity with which MMA fans think that's cringe, apparently.
Well,
yeah.
I think it's cool, though.
I agree. I thought everybody thought that. It's cool. It's like, people are like, no, it's weird. I'm
Everyone
like, yeah,
wishes
it's...
that they had the hacker, but only a few people can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And people were saying it's weird. Miguel Class was talking about this, so I'm like, or maybe Val Dewar was actually talking about it. And it's like, yeah, it is weird, but it's weird in a cool way, because it's like something that's very particular to this culture. And like, if you even learn one thing about the history of this posturing, you're like, oh, this is kind of neat. But like, people hate it, apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Weird.
It annoyed me. MMA fans suck. They have no fucking culture. It has turned me into like more of an anti-American than I was before. You have no culture, you swine. You can't appreciate cultural heritage. Well, Kai Kara-France is very proud of his partial Maori ancestry, and I say keep sticking your tongue out at people. I like it.
Yeah.
I believe, by the way, that's historically signifies that you are going to eat your opponent after you're done killing them. Which
Sweet.
is awesome. How is that not cool? That's so scary. Anyway, let's call segment 2 there, I suppose, and clean up the rest of this main card, or whatever we care to clean up after this. Dan Hooker, Mateusz Gamrot, Jairzinho Rozenstruik, Tai Tuivasa, maybe something else, maybe not. We'll see. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. All right, let's talk about the lightweights. Another one in which I was betrayed by someone I considered a friend. How good is Dan Hooker's wrestling, really? This individual said to me. And I said, well, it looks good, but I guess he hasn't fought any wrestlers as good as Gamrot. On the other hand, I pointed out, Gamrot has never once convinced me with a win. And wouldn't you know it?
I agreed.
Wouldn't you know it? Another split decision from Gamrot, but he fucked up in his in the ritual this time. Whatever blood offering he was supposed to make, he neglected to, and for the first time since he fought Guram Kutateladze back in, when was that? Was that like 2019 at this point? 2020. He actually lost a split decision. Actually, you know what? He's only had one split since then, but that is insane that like the Sarukian decision was unanimous. That one, and there was another one in there too, I feel like, that was not convincing. Maybe not, though. Anyway, the point being it felt very much like a Gamrot fight. In fact, it felt like a fight from the version of Gamrot we were actually praising for having improved, becoming a more active striker off of his back foot, throwing with more power. To an extent that I didn't think it was particularly clear that Dan Hooker won this fight. Made it all.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's one of the interesting things about this one, right? Is that it's one of the Gamrot weird decisions where he actually, like, most of the rest of the time, like, people are like, well, I guess he did get a bunch of takedowns, but he certainly did get out damaged. Whereas this was like one of his most consistently violent performances.
Mm-hmm.
And like one of his ones where he landed like the most meaningful offense. And this is the one where people are just like, get out of here, Gamrot, you got destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a little surprised by the stats. This is one I might even be curious enough to like rewatch the fight and count myself to see if I agree with the official statistics. They do have Dan Hooker outlanding Gamrot by 1 significant strike. And being outlanded by 6 total strikes. I don't know what those are strikes on the ground or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I actually felt that, in both rounds 2 and 3, Gamrot was actually, like, Dan Hooker was getting hit a ton walking in. The stats do not reflect that. They have him outlanding him in both those rounds, with round 3 being basically even. But, with neither guy getting really badly hurt, I thought it was a very close call for Dan Hooker. Optically, this was a Dan Hooker, he won this fight. He had Gamrot running around the cage. He was putting insane pressure on him. He simply wasn't bothered by anything he was getting hit by, except for the shot that actually dropped him in round 1. Briefly, flash knockdown, but still. But this was basically the fight that Alex Perez could have won over Muhammad Mokaev.
Mm-hmm.
If he had simply thrown as many strikes as Dan Hooker did here, even if he hadn't outlanded Mokaev, he probably would have got the win on optics, because it would have looked like he was bossing Mokaev around, and that is what it looked like here, even though I'm not sure that was a clear material victory for Dan Hooker.
Yeah, this was a body language win for sure.
Yeah.
Because increasingly as the fight went on, and this was actually awesome to see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gamrot kind of looked, I don't know if miserable was the right word, but like he was getting through it.
Yeah.
He was just here to suffer this fight. And as the fight went on, like, Dan Hooker just looked like he was having a good time.
Yeah. He literally said in his corner,
rounds,
I love this shit.
Yeah. Between rounds, he was looking happy. Like, at the end of the fight, when they were waiting for the decision to be called.
Yeah, he was just vibing.
Like waiting for a decision to be called against, Mateusz Gamrot. This is essentially waiting for certain death.
Yeah.
This is like, you've been tried by the government of a dictatorship.
Yeah.
And you absolutely know that you're going to get executed.
Yeah, you've been told the chemotherapy didn't work and you're going to continue to die slowly. And you're just sitting there waiting for it to happen. Yeah. And he's like, thumbs up, man.
Yeah. And it turned out that the vibes were infectious because he won.
Yeah. I think
I'm not sure that he won in the most granular scoring perspective, when you could say the term. But again, this is another one of those fights where I would just say, if you are Mateusz Gamrot, you should expect to lose this fight.
Absolutely, yes. And to be clear, I'm not saying I think Dan Hooker didn't win. I just thought it was a very close fight that is honestly hard to objectively call.
Yes. Very much so.
Given that things like control and aggression, well, hey, if all else being equal, they are supposed to count. So I suppose you could call this a fair case of a fighter having aggression and control scored in their favor.
Mm-hmm.
And fair enough, because everything else was pretty damn close on the shots landed, but Dan Hooker was in charge. So I suppose, and from that perspective, he, by the rules, deserves to win.
Yeah. And just genuinely, just like a great performance from both men.
Yeah. This was an awesome fight.
On Twitter, this was the best card of the best fight of the card, and where both guys turned up.
Mm-hmm.
And 100% agree.
Yeah, I gotta say, I love any kind of fight event in I would say, a small or moderate sized venue, which this was a moderately sized arena. Everybody loves the Fight for the Troops cards. Also, I'm trying to remember the name of it, because I was just talking about James Toney on Twitter the other day and his fight with Vasily Jirov, and that was in the maybe Mohegan Sun. I think it was in like an Indian casino a venue, but I love the smaller rooms and the moderate sized rooms. There is a sense, even from watching it on TV, there's a sense of like immediacy to the crowd atmosphere. And I think a lot of fighters were riding the energy of that. Dricus du Plessis said after his win, it was the greatest energy he'd ever felt from a live audience. He was just having a blast out there. And I think Dan Hooker was feeling it too. Yeah, I love these cards for that in particular. But yeah, Dan Hooker, super intense pressure. Lot of excellent body work. I thought that was a really good idea. A lot of his actual clean damage was to the body. And in particular, his front kick, but also his right uppercut to the body, which continually not only landed, but set up the left hook. That was his best punch in this fight consistently. I thought some really nice combinations, but also tremendous mat wrestling and scrambling ability. He got hit by several takedowns. In fact, let me see. What do the statistics say? They credit Gamrot with 5 of 15 takedowns scored. Only 5 minutes of control total, and a lot of that was probably banked at the end of round 1.
Yeah, after the knockdown.
Yeah. Yeah, right. In the middle of round 1, I suppose, when he was really going ham with the ground and pound. Another good addition, by the way, to Gamrot's game. He has actually been a lot more effective with his top position recently. But Dan Hooker's ability to either just produce a scramble and get his way back to his feet, or to create a threat. This was one of the more effective guillotine as takedown defense performances I've seen in a while.
Yeah. Okay.
And that is something we talked about, the guillotine as a part of Hooker's like tall man punishing short guys game. I don't think I could have appreciated the extent to which it would, we know he's got a great guillotine, but I did not appreciate how effective it would be in stymieing Gamrot's wrestling. But it really...
Yeah, and how much he was able to turn it into a sweep.
Yeah. Excellent
situations.
Excellent use of the guillotine from Dan Hooker in just a super fun fight.
Yeah, and as I said, just genuinely really good performance from Gamrot as well.
Mm-hmm.
He was throwing in combination.
Mm-hmm.
So much of what he's done has been in the past has been just one and done, and then diving for the takedown. He was genuinely setting his shots up with his strikes really well, and sometimes he was just outstriking Dan Hooker.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a violent, cool fight.
Yeah. We still got to see the diversity of his takedown game, which is always a treat to watch, even if it is sometimes the only treat in an otherwise frustrating performance. This time it was just the icing on the cake. And once again, there's a takedown in the third round. He goes for a single, of course, and he tries to like treetop Dan Hooker. He elevates his leg really, really high, and Hooker somehow maintains his balance, bounces all the way to the fence, and that's when Gamrot ditches the leg. He even kind of like throws it by to off-balance Hooker and switches to a single on the far leg, and Dan Hooker snaps the guillotine on him, and he has to bail. So Dan Hooker's wrestling held up even in the transitions, which is frequently where Gamrot shocks people by continuing to wrestle them when they think they've defended the takedown. Really, really good work. Yep. Dan Hooker, not done. Still fun. Having a blast. And now looks like, as I said on Twitter, he is about to drop a single where he raps about not getting vaccinated. He's suddenly covered in tattoos and has bleach blonde hair. I think Dan Hooker, who is a funny, charming guy in a very typically Antipodian way, I think he said, the commentary quoted him as saying, he just discovered character customization. It's a pretty funny joke. He's like making fun of how drastically he's changed his appearance. But once again, just Dan Hooker having fun. You could feel that.
Yeah. Yeah, particularly after, his disastrous run down, attempt to go back to featherweight and all that kind of stuff. It was really one of those situations where you were like, is that Jalen Turton performance something durable? Can he do that again? And yeah, he can. And he's clearly, because that's the worst thing you can do in this sport is to not be enjoying it anymore. So, yeah, it was just great to see him having a good time in there.
Yeah, he's not going to be able to do it forever, but like if the man is going to have insane, violent back and forth fights, at least he's having fun doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you love to see that. All right, last words then on Jairzinho Rozenstruik Tai Tuivasa. This one we did mention in brief, largely to give me an opportunity to complain about Tai Tuivasa, who seems to me a beacon of a sport-wide tendency. There are a lot of frustrating sport-wide tendencies in MMA. Miguel Class was posting a little compilation of Israel Adesanya turning his back and trying to run along the fence, and putting that alongside, I think, just 2 or 3 of the many, many other fighters who do that. Not even when they're hurt or tired, but just because they do not know how to get out of a corner. He and I were actually talking about that in particular, in reference to a boxing sparring clip that dropped, where we were talking about the disadvantages of MMA sparring and how it's conducted. And one of those is, I think MMA fighters do a lot of lighter sparring, which is probably good, although there are definitely benefits to doing lots of hard sparring, just not long-term benefits. He pointed out, though, a point that I think you and I have both raised before, which is that MMA fighters also do a lot of open mat sparring. A lot of gyms simply do not have room for a full-sized octagon. Or even a full-sized smaller cage. They take up more space than a boxing ring does. And you need all that room for grappling training as well. You can't reserve as much space for the ring. And that's, I think, probably part of why MMA fighters have such terrible, terrible footwork out of the corner. But this being an unfixable problem is just like one aspect of Tai Tuivasa's, the degree to which Tai Tuivasa's coaches have utterly failed him in preparing him for fights, in helping him to improve in any meaningful way. I know you made, I think, the very salient point that, MMA fighters don't make enough money, but still, he does have coaches. What are they teaching him? Any guesses? Phil? Oh.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, whatever they're telling him, then it's not sticking.
Yeah. Or they're just, I mean, I think that's possible. But, frankly, I feel like, MMA fans are a little too apt to blame the fighters and do not look to the coaches. I think there's a lot of fucking charlatans in this sport. I really do. Who are just taking fighters' money and they don't know what they're doing. Like, this is not, you can't have actually a qualified boxing coach. Or a qualified Muay Thai coach, if this is what your striking looks like and you're losing now 5 in a row and you just look exactly the same in every one of those fights and in all the fights before then, even when you were winning, what are they doing? They told him in the first round, Phil, they said, you need to, after the first round, they said, you need to hide the low kick. And I thought, hide it with what? You haven't taught the man how to jab. You haven't taught him how to feint. Like, what do you mean hide the low kick? That is like such pat advice that it's not practical advice because he doesn't know what that means. Like, he doesn't have an effective way of hiding his kicks. And it's your fault. You're his coaches. Why is he not changed? It can't all be Tai Tuivasa's fault. I find that too hard to believe.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. But it did give us, this fight did give us one thing, which that it got a judge booted.
Yes, that was funny.
And frankly, this should have happened many times in the past. But yeah, it was good to see.
Yeah.
That someone gave a scorecard that was so egregious that people were just like, no, you're not scoring any more cards today.
Yeah.
Go home.
I wish I could recall who it was. There was a journalist tweeting, talking about that particular judge's record and how he has in fact differed from the other 2 judges he's scored fights alongside more than any other judge across like all UFC bouts. He has a much higher percentage.
Amazing.
So he is just apparently consistently not a good judge. And kudos to the Australian Athletic Commission for nipping that shit in the bud. That guy was supposed to be judging the main event. So, shouldn't have been there in the first place, but kudos. They actually stepped in and were like, nope, we don't want to have this controversy on our UFC card. Absolutely not. That was a very good decision. It should happen a lot more. Speaking, by the way, this just, I mean, there's not much more to say about this fight. Jairzinho Rozenstruik has a lot of problems, but at least he knows how to like get his jab online and move behind it and step in with it. And Tai Tuivasa was like trying to jab. It was at least like throwing a lot of combinations, but he couldn't actually sell the jab because he only knows how to think of it as a setup because nobody's taught him how to use the jab as a weapon and super flexible tool in its own right. And he also couldn't sustain the combinations because he would eat a counter that would daze him and then he would just sort of go away with the offense. That's really all there is to say about it. Last thing I want to point out, though, before we close out is I thought this was maybe one of the worst Dominic Cruz commentating performances ever. He's somehow just getting worse. He had he wasn't alone in this one, but he did take it to a level beyond the other commentators. In the final preliminary fight, Walter Walker, the racially clean monster who said that he wants to exterminate Junior Tafa's family. That was interesting. He got a...
He didn't actually say that, did he?
Oh, yeah. He used the word exterminate.
Oh, my God. Oh, dear.
The whole clean monster thing with the Germanic name, it was just a funny joke, but now I'm actually concerned.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he said he wants to fight Justin Tafa next. I want to exterminate them from fighting. Yeah, that was a troubling remark.
Yeah.
But this fight ended with a heel hook due to verbal submission. Not one of the commentators were aware of what I thought was a pretty, like it's happened before. that fights have been stopped in the UFC because a fighter screams while they're in a submission. That is considered a verbal tap. It's not always enforced, but neither is any rule. You should at least know, both as a fighter and certainly as a commentator, that if you cry out in pain, the referee has full discretion to consider that a tap. They kept going on about how he didn't say tap. That's the only qualification for a verbal submission. Nobody stepped in. Like, there was nobody in the truck to tell them that this is in fact a well-established rule. I don't know. But then Dominic Cruz went on to continue his what will surely be a lifelong grudge against Keith Peterson by bitching about how referees can just ruin your career. It was so clear that he's still thinking about that perfectly justified Keith Peterson stoppage. He's still bitter about it. This was just one of many instances of him being unbelievably annoying on this card, but Dominic Cruz makes DC seem like the greatest commentator on earth. Like, he's got to go. Please. He's the closest thing the UFC has to a Big John on commentary. He's such a fun suck. He takes himself so seriously. He's not nearly as smart as he thinks he is. We gotta...
Yeah, that's one of the worst things, is that, like, being a dumb guy who gives the impression of being a smart guy is possibly the worst thing you could do in this kind of scenario.
Yes. Yeah, and he's also, he's arrogant too. Like, he's like a dog with a bone. Every time an argument comes up, he cannot fucking drop it. And it's really not fun to listen to, so. That was the final thing that stood out to me at this card. Unless you've got anything else, I think we're ready to wrap up.
Well, I mean, mostly just we can say that Carlos Protest looks amazing.
Yep, another fighting nerd out there just murdering people.
Yep. Sometimes maybe a little bit too slick for his own good, but also just very slick and very sharp and very dangerous.
Yeah. Casey O'Neill got a good win. I wasn't sure she was going to be able to beat Luana Santos. That was cool. That's it. That's all I got.
Yep.
All right. Well, that'll do it then. Make sure you find us on Twitter if you'd like to yell at us about any of our opinions or takes here. If you'd like to, as somebody just did to me earlier today, respond to an objective analysis in which I am mostly critiquing Israel Adesanya with a picture where you're like, too bad, and it's Dricus du Plessis submitting him, and you think you've owned me because because that's how sports fans think. Like, everything is just a petty argument about subjective shit that could never be proven anyway. If you want to tweet stuff like that at us, you can do that at Evil Greg Jackson. That's Phil at Boxing Bush. That's me. Please check out our Patreon. We will try to get another piece of bonus content out at some point in this month. I'm not sure what it will be just yet, but we'll do that. And check out my Substack, Finer Points of Face Punching, facepunching.substack.com. I released a mostly just having fun and shit-talking breakdown of Dricus du Plessis' abysmal technique. And I am going to have a lot of fun finishing the article I'm currently working on, where I follow up on that by still talking shit and having to continue to admit that he's so much better than I ever could have imagined. So that's facepunching.substack.com. I appreciate your support and enjoy writing the stuff, so please go over there and check that out. That'll be out sometime in the back half of this week. And that's it. Next week, we'll be back to talk about whatever hopefully interesting happens on this Cannonier versus Caio Borralho card, and also look forward to the Gilbert Burns versus Sean Brady card coming the next weekend. Both are Apex cards. Neither is as bad as an Apex card can get. And I do not just mean in comparison to the one we got 2 weeks ago. They're okay as far as Apex cards go. Yay. So there should be some material, some interesting material to talk about. And until then, If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.